Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, hope you're having a fantastic day and a fantastic week. Let's jump straight in today. We're going to talk a little bit about organizational culture, as we often do, right? But this time, we're going to talk a little bit around how we're going to talk a little bit in general about efficiency and effectiveness, but then how it interplays between our teams and our leaders, right? And some of the things we have to recognize and we have to laugh at too, right? Because if we're not laughing, you're probably crying. So let's kind of jump into organizational culture and what it means to be effective. Okay, so generally speaking, we think, oh, okay, organizational culture. How many things can I make in a short amount of time using the least amount of materials so that I can create value that I can then sell and I get, right, a reciprocal. I get paid for, me or my team, my organization gets paid, and thereby a business is created, and these things cover my costs. And then I work to keep my resources, my supply chain, as cost effective as possible. Not cheap, right? We don't want to go there. That's dangerous territory. But we want to keep it as in control as possible and our processes. So let's look back at old school, now school, future school, right? Go old school, and what you find is that because of the lack, we didn't use as much computers as much, we didn't use some of that, so a lot of things were done manually. So the cost paradigms were based on what? Old uh, costing of what it took to create product. And over time, in some organizations, these things aren't revised often enough. And even in more modern organizations, a detachment from the process. And I'm going to use a hypothetical. Let's say you have an engineer that's designed your process, but they haven't worked closely enough and they haven't done enough testing of the runs and so forth to establish what the actual cost, say, of to create this product is. Once I do have the materials in house, we'll assume that all the due diligence was done on materials. Well, if they don't do the due diligence to accurately cost the production process, then in the end you're going to over or undercharge the customer, right? You undercharge the customer, you're not paying for the work that you're trying to do, you're probably losing money, right? And you charge the customer too much, and you're kind of fleecing the customer. And that's, it can kind of fall into that category of laziness, because if you go, well, geez, I don't know how our competitors can make it cheaper than we do. Well, perhaps your customers have actually updated and reassessed the costing, not trying to build in a buffer. You can say that's a little bit on the fleecing of the customer if you're not doing your due diligence when you're creating product. You can also look at the organizational structure too. Old organizational structures, with the pyramidal kind of organizational structure, had a lot of overlap, which meant there were people who, you only had to be probably 65% effective at your job. Somebody was going to catch something or a mistake or something in the system. Not always, but sometimes. So there's that, not a highly efficient, but the transition to a flat organizational culture means that you want to what? You want to have high competence, because you can't have a flat org culture and have 65% competent people working for you. They have to be in the 90 plus, obviously as high as possible, but above 90% competence, right? Uh, we're evaluating, at least subjectively, human beings. Nobody's 100%, right? So let's say 95 is the top that you're ever going to find. Why else would you have quality systems, right, built into your process? They're to verify and validate that everything was produced, created, or the service we provided is as we promised, right? So there's that thing. The difficulty from a leadership and ownership perspective is they want to jump from a pyramidal org structure to a flat one, because they see a cost savings if I don't have, so let's say I have 35% less administrators and staff. Okay, well, it makes sense that over time you want to flatten that out. But what they don't often do is their competence isn't elevated at the same rate that they want to flatten their org structure. So they may go from a pyramid where there's a lot of people to a flat org structure where there's maybe 60% of the same volume of administrators and staff and so forth and support functions. But they do it like this and they don't account for the competence, and thereby quality issues arise. Then, as a reaction to this, they bolster their quality department because, oh, we have a quality issue. Well, what you didn't realize is that you had people in your staff who were catching issues as they did pop up and correcting those on the fly, which meant you thought you had high quality and that your quality has dipped. No, the mistake that was made is you went to a flat org structure in a snap to get quick costs, you may have done it for monetary return and quick gains. It's possible you did it to compete. It could have been a mix of things, but doing that never helps you because you end up taking 3 steps back. Your quality suffers, your production level suffers because you're going to have to stop to fix whatever came off sideways, right? And you're going to have to fix that. This is the time when teams tend to disintegrate somewhat and take 3 steps back themselves because quality department's pointing at the production department and production's pointing at engineering's pointing at, see where this is going. It creates a mess. And the reality is that you went too fast. You didn't use change management. You didn't account for your transformative measures in your organization and to follow some simple steps in change management, right? So that is also an ineffective way. That's definitely has a ripple effect through your organization. And because you don't use change management techniques and systems to do this, what ends up happening is these team members get off in their own tributary. And then you get kind of a factional divide within your organization. Then what you think is poor organizational culture because they aren't communicating, well, there's a root cause. Why aren't they communicating? And you have to do the 5 whys now to get to the bottom of it, to figure out why. You can't stop at the most obvious thing. You got to dig a little deeper to figure out what that is. So your effectiveness can be driven by so many different things going on at once. You could have poor materials. You could have production errors because of machinery or because of high turnover. And what drives the high turnover? Poor organizational culture. Well, why is the organizational culture poor? If you don't have a development program within your organizational culture, people are not going to stick around a long time because they want to grow. They want to learn different skills. They don't want to do the same thing for 5 years, okay? They want to learn. They want to maybe do this department and that one. You see what I'm saying? They want to grow and develop, just like you want to grow and develop your organization. So you have to create that in-house. Some folks, some organizations are small. If you're less than 100 or say 100 down to 20, in that range, you might go, okay, well, hey, HR, I need to get let's look for some programs off the shelf. Well, the difficulty here is you want to get an off-the-shelf program that matches your organization or that can be utilized by your organization. And the problem there is that one size does not fit all. Some of the issues that you have are specific to your organization, right? And you have to somewhat tailor the response and how you tackle the root cause. Not so much the how, but the root causes are going to be different, right? It's not cookie cutter root causes. You can never say, oh, it's just the leadership who stink, right? Oh, well, it's the broader employee pool, the team that stinks. Oh, it's the quality department. Oh, it's the this. Oh, it's the that. That may occur, right, within your organization. If you start to see that from different departments, this is how you know your organizational culture is eroding and degrading, okay? And you may think and leap to the conclusion, well, our communication isn't, they're not talking to each other. That may be true. But again, come back to root cause, and you got to dive deeper to figure it out. So some of the things you need to do aren't so cosmic that you need to spend a ridiculous amount of money off the shelf. People like myself, we come in and we can do the work. We're not associated with firms, so you're not paying firm prices. Most companies are 100 people or less. they're small business, right? So they can't afford high costs. So you need folks who are efficient, effective, right? Can get to the heart of the matter. Think of, and this didn't even happen. I don't remember this in my lifetime, but they exist pre my lifetime. The old country doctor who made house call to see how things were going and to help when somebody was sick, right? That's what you need. You need somebody who can come, handle the issue, help take care of the thing. Because if you don't want to buy the hospital, right, because you have a cold, right, this would be the example. You want to use cost effective measures to help to untangle and to grow your organizational culture and help empower and train and teach up your team. So we talked about developing your team, right? So that's part of it. Then you've got to clean up your processes and open those lines of communication, right? Then you got to look at where are you spending too much. You're overspending in areas you don't even realize that you are. And this can be catastrophic, especially if there's a mechanical maintenance, facility oriented, that sort of thing. You need to look at ways that you can find good deals, right? So rather than um, you know spending a ridiculous amount of money to buy something off the shelf that's brand new, in some instances you might get a pallet of that stuff from someone, right, for half that price. Well, now I've got 10 times the volume of spare parts, and I spent considerably less. That's just an extreme example. It's not going to apply everywhere you go for all things, but you need to be creative problem solvers. You need to find creative ways in house. Think of it this way. I remember this one outfit I worked for, helping to improve their, all of everything they had going on, really. Temperature control was an issue, but they didn't have huge refrigeration, set up for huge refrigeration. Yet they had pallets and pallets and pallets of material that needed to be kept at a certain temperature. Well, what did we do? Well, we found a remote part of the factory and we walled it off, right? We were creative problem solving. We walled it off. We brought in air to cool it down, right? And that air plugged into our water supply and so forth and so on. We hooked it up, made it work, got the temperature down, and what did that do? It reduced the amount of waste of product that we had on those pallets so that product lasted longer, right? And you reduce your waste by being creative problem solvers. It's just one example of many. But by doing these things, and then you go forth through your production line or your value stream, you don't even have to make a product. You are doing something in there where you're driving up more waste. You're using paper or too much paper. You're using something, right? You're doing something. You're running a second or third shift with 2 or 3 people. Doesn't make sense. It would make more sense not to run that shift, conserve on your power, and run your first or second shift, like instead of an 8, make it a 10 or a 10 or a 12, or overlapping shifts, right? So you can keep things flowing. Common sense. If I got 3 or 4 people on a mid shift and I'm not really getting the production value because of situational, the handoff and all these things, less handoffs, the better. Okay. And it's better. You can make a longer, more streamlined, longer runs for 3 or 4 days versus chopping them up and having full coverage 24 hours for 5 or 6. You just have to be creative about how you do it. So you have to get your team on board and start being creative with how you find ways to keep your production flow and your product flow and your service flow moving. Okay. And there's so much technology out there now to adapt these tools to fit it. All right, folks, this is clearly a topic where we could go on and on for an hour or two in so many categories, but I just wanted to touch a little bit on effectiveness. And remember, when you're reducing waste and you're improving how you produce and the quality comes along with that, and you're improving your retention rates and you're doing all these things, you're driving down costs. When you're driving down, and then these are all waste, right? You're driving your waste costs down. You're driving your waste costs down, split that into 3. First, you're saving the customer. You want to give some of that back to the customer. Next, because you're employing your team to go above and beyond to be innovative and problem solvers, a third of that needs to go to your team. And then the other third goes to your organization. If you follow that path, it's always the customer, the team, if you follow 1, 2, 3, the customer, the team, then the organization by proxy will always benefit. But you've created a win, win, win. So 3 wins. Win, win, win. Customer, team, organization. Don't forget that. All right, folks, that's enough for today. Remember to hit that green domino 3 to 5 times a day to uplift, motivate, and just inspire folks and encourage them as well. And when you do that, not only are we transforming culture, right, organizational culture, we're transforming culture and we're transforming ourselves in the process. And we're helping folks out. And that's just an amazing thing. Okay, folks, hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.